Welcome back to the channel. This is a video about New York City public health official Jay Varma and the sex parties he had when he was setting the most draconian COVID-19 policies in New York City. We're going to talk about that. But first, I have a plug for you. Coming soon, October 7th, in the evening at Emory University, Atlanta, there's going to be a discussion between myself and Chairman of Medicine Carlos Del Rio. The title of this is titled Masking Mistakes: Lessons from the Science, Policy, and Coverage of COVID-19. A conversation between Carlos Del Rio and myself. I'll put it up on the screen. Monday, October 7th, 2024, 6:30 p.m. at the Emory Center for Ethics, brought to you by Brian Shields. Thank you. This is a donor who donated money so that we could have this event. This is a very interesting event. There's going to be a registration link that I'll try to put into the comments, and it will allow anybody to register based on Zoom. And then hopefully they're going to record this and put this video out. I really think they should record it, and it'll be a lot of fun, and we're going to get into COVID-19 policy errors, and whether they were just made in retrospect or whether or not some people knew they were errors all along. This will be an interesting discussion, and I thank the folks at Emory for putting this on in the Center for Ethics. Now, Jay Varma. Well. Last week, Dr. Jay Varma, a New York City public health official, was caught on hidden camera. And he said, basically, at the height of COVID-19 restrictions in 2020, he, his wife, and between 8 and 10 other people gathered in a hotel room, took ecstasy, and then got naked and engaged in a sex party. At one point in the video, he says it wasn't just about the penetrative sex, it was also just getting the energy off your chest and being close to other people. Meanwhile, while he said that, we're not allowed to say goodbye to your dying mother or father in New York City. Schools were closed, at least public schools, and kids were pushed out of public schools. And Bill de Blasio, his old boss, actually went in person and shut down an outdoor Orthodox Jewish funeral. So you can't bury your dead, you can't see your mother on her deathbed, your kids can't go to school. And Jay Varma, who was setting these policies and later masking kids as young as 2 years old, he was having a sex party. In Vinay Prasad's observations and thoughts, I have a lot to say about this topic, and I'm going to cover some of that in this video here. First of all, obviously I want to say a string of expletives, and I did. The moment I heard that news, I cursed this guy out, and I cursed out everyone just like him, because they're hypocrites of the worst kind. They're happy to enforce restrictions on you, on your children, on all the people of New York City. While they themselves flaunt the restrictions, they themselves don't take it seriously. Now, how was he caught? People want to talk about how he was caught. He appears to be caught on hidden camera by a conservative commentator. The person actually questioning him is a woman. He discusses his polyamorous lifestyle. So it looks like, we don't know for sure, it looks like this person has tricked him by going on a date with him and get him to fess up to all these things he did in the past. And so he wants to say, and he said some statement like, this is a trap, the videos are sliced and diced, etc., etc. You can make whatever excuses you want, okay? You had the sex party when you were setting restrictions. That's absolutely abhorrent and absolutely unjustified. And there's that old saying that people will be out to get you. They're going to look for skeletons in your closet. But if on videotape you admit to being a mass murderer, well, you got no one to blame but yourself. And that's what they got here. He's admitting to the crime. So it doesn't matter that they're out to get him. They actually found him guilty of a crime, which is hypocrisy. And worse than that, the most onerous, the most horrific kind of hypocrisy imaginable. I'm going to talk about his J-Dob when he was caught. The point I make in my perspective piece is that people want to say that Jay Varma is a one-off. He's a public health official who didn't practice what he preached, do as I say, not as I do. He's just a one-off. But the point I want to make is he's not a one-off. He's a symbol for all of these people who enforced restrictions on us. Gavin Newsom, he went to the French Laundry restaurant while lockdowns were in place. Gavin Newsom sent his kids to private school while the public kids in California rotted at home with a Zoom education, losing educational attainment and trapping themselves, for many people, into patterns of poverty because public schools were closed. He's a hypocrite of the worst kind. Gretchen Whitmer, she used PAC money to fly to Florida to go visit a relative while her state had severe lockdowns. Nancy Pelosi, the hair salon incident in San Francisco, she got her hair cut when that was also banned. We've got Deb Bricks, who had Thanksgiving at her loved one's house. Well, she told people not to have Thanksgiving. These people are all hypocrites of the worst kind, public health officials who wanted to enforce things on you and your family while they didn't take the rules seriously. Why does this matter? I think one point to make off the bat is people say the narrative of COVID-19, now finally, people say what I've been saying on this channel for years. We got the school closure wrong. We got the masking toddlers wrong. We got the vaccine mandates wrong. I said all of that for years. I wrote many op-eds. Now more people are admitting that. But they say we got it wrong only in retrospect. Only in retrospect do we know lockdowns were wrong and the masking was foolish and that tests weren't going to stop the virus. We got this wrong only in retrospect. These admissions show that at the time where he was fear-mongering the public to take COVID-19 seriously, he himself wasn't taking it seriously. While he thought others should wear masks and testing wouldn't be enough, he wasn't doing that himself. By him, I mean him and other public health officials were saying that's not enough. He wasn't doing that himself. The people who enforce these policies privately did not take COVID-19 seriously. That's yet another additional degree of hypocrisy. The next point. I think it shows that public health was so perverted in the pandemic, and was perverted by the architects of lockdown in the United States and in Western society. Neil Ferguson, oh, by the way, here's another one. Neil Ferguson was having an affair and violating lockdown, the lockdown that he created with his own incorrect model from Imperial College London. Anthony Fauci, he pushed for lockdown. Deb Bricks pushed for lockdown. She had Thanksgiving while she was pushing for policies that discouraged people from having Thanksgiving. These people, they took a playbook, and the playbook they took was from China. The playbook they took was from totalitarian regimes, and they said lockdown was something that we could do. The police state could enforce lockdown and school closure and all these draconian things. That's not what public health ever meant. Pre-pandemic, what public health meant was you would go to a place that was suffering an outbreak of cholera or Ebola, and you would provide resources and give people the opportunity and the way and empower people to avoid the fate of cholera. You'd provide them clean drinking water. When it comes to Ebola, you'd provide protection so that they'd be able to bury their loved ones without directly coming into contact with body fluids, for instance. You'd provide resources to prevent the spread of an illness. That's not what happened with COVID-19. We didn't provide resources so that people could get out of multi-generational homes where somebody is still working in a slaughterhouse so that they're not bringing back COVID to the family. We're not providing resources. We provided restrictions. We let rich people be able to go to their summer homes and have their kids with private pods and nannies and private schools. That was all open. We took away schools for poor people, for people, working class people, for average people. We took away the national parks. You couldn't go on a beach, but if you owned your own beachfront property, you could go out there. We restricted people's movement, and that was a philosophical difference. That was the key philosophy of Fauciism and Bricksism. That was their key insight. The Democrats ran wild with that. Emboldened by the teachers' unions, they ran, in 2020, the Biden campaign, fear-mongering about school closure. They were aided and abetted by Apoorva Mandavilli and others in the New York Times who wrote article after article on the harms to children, which are incredibly distorted because we all know now all the kids got COVID-19 globally. And they're all mostly fine, the healthy kids. Kids who had underlying medical problems, they did not always do so well. But most kids are healthy kids. Most kids got the virus without the vaccine, almost all of them globally, and most kids did fine. It's just another cold for kids. It always had an IFR on par with seasonal influenza in kids, or even lower in kids. Kids didn't need a vaccine. They didn't need to wear masks. They didn't need their schools to be closed. They didn't need their lives to be ruined, particularly adolescents. They didn't need that either. They lost out on a lot of socialization at a key age. And how many of them are suffering from anxiety and other sorts of mental health problems that perhaps are linked not to the virus, but to the way in which adults treated them around the virus and the reaction to the virus. So, these public health officials were happy to have a two-tier system, restrictions for you, for the plebeians, for the poor people, but not for them. They're exempted from all the restrictions. Gavin sends his kids to private school. Jay Varma gets to have his sex parties. If you want to go see your grandma in the hospital and you say you'll test before you see her before she dies, no, that you're not allowed to do that. We don't got enough tests for that, but we got plenty of tests for Jay Varma having sex on Molly with a bunch of people and his wife, who, by the way, is a pediatrician. Speaking of pediatrics, the American Association of Pediatrics is a failed organization in the United States that actually said a 2-year-old should wear a cloth mask except for when they nap. Because of that, regular people, there are many stories you can look up online of a mother who was thrown off an airplane because her toddler didn't mask. I found at least 2. Meanwhile, if you have a private jet, you can go with your toddler. Toddler didn't have to wear a mask. So there's this two-tier system, and that's what they're enforcing. Jay Varma It's not the story. The story is that he's a metaphor. He's a symbol for what public health meant, which was the use of the police state against regular people, disproportionately targeting people who are not at risk of the virus, with goals such as slowing the spread and flattening the curve that were never quantified or outlined, without any ongoing attempts to figure out if any of this shit was actually working. No randomization, no staggered implementation. They were closing playgrounds. They were banning people from beaches. They were asking the Home Depot clerk, some 17-year-old kid working Home Depot, to enforce a mask mandate, a cloth mask mandate, a useless mask mandate. They were making regular average people do all sorts of theater to amuse them while they got to have their sex parties. It's really a story of the elites, the people setting these policies, and the people subject to these policies. And I think that's the indictment of public health. That's why public health is a failed institution. That's why public health will not recover its credibility. That's why when the CDC added COVID-19 vaccinations to routine childhood immunizations, people didn't sign up for the obviously unnecessary COVID-19 vaccine for a newborn. Obviously unnecessary. Instead, they did the wrong thing, which was they decided not to go forward with a routine immunization that is valuable for things like polio in the young kids. People have no trust in these officials, and they shouldn't. They shouldn't until they admit that they were wrong, not just in retrospect, but at the time, that they admit they violated the norms of democratic and free society, that they admit they have too much power, and they should not be allowed to set these policies without proving in randomized fashion that these policies improve outcomes, and even then, that we can quantify the benefits and that the public ultimately accepts the benefits and the trade-offs. They did none of that. They're the lowest kind of policymaker is a public health official, a hypocritical public health official. They weaponize the police state, I read in this article. Gavin can go to French Laundry. Gavin can send his kids to private school. You can't. You're stuck at home with your kids. Gavin can go to his friend's house with access to the beach. You can't because they closed the beaches. Why do they close the beaches? Because the people setting the policy are incompetent. They knew at the time that they did not spread outdoors. We had plenty of evidence of that. They knew the age gradient from the earliest data in Wuhan. They knew that the Swedes actually never closed elementary school, and they did not have mass casualties of a different order of magnitude than surrounding nations. They knew that all of Western Europe reopened mostly within 6 and 12 weeks, while they kept schools closed yet another year. Varma makes another admission in the video. He says that de Blasio lacked the courage to go up against the teachers' unions. For all the faults of Varma, he has many. He was wrong about vaccine mandates. That was a terrible policy that he pushed. And he talks in the video nonchalantly about making life difficult for unvaccinated people to force them to comply. I find that rhetoric disgusting. And worse, not very useful in a city where many people had already had natural immunity and you didn't need to force them to do anything. And you certainly don't need to force young people to do anything because their risks were always very low. He's happy to talk about that. But one thing he was good on was schools. He did want schools to reopen, but de Blasio didn't have the courage to go up against the teachers' unions, and he admits that in these videos. De Blasio, come on. Wish he had some courage. You know who did have courage, actually? Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis had courage. He actually reopened the schools, even when Fauci went on TV repeatedly in the first quarter of 2020 and said that he was being, the second quarter, April, and he said that he was being reckless, April and May, that DeSantis was being reckless. DeSantis was right. Fauci was wrong. Closing thoughts. It is bad that Jay Varma and his wife, a pediatrician, went to sex parties while the AAP forced toddlers to mask and while Varma enforced unethical lockdowns and unethical vaccine mandates. But it is much worse that public health officials broadly pushed policies that they themselves did not believe in, policies that they felt did not apply to elites like them, policies that for risk that they felt is not that risky. They were happy to take the risk of COVID-19, but they didn't let you, and that is the deep hypocrisy. The last thing I'd say is Jay Varma got his ass fired. He got his ass fired from Sega Technologies. Sega Technologies, what the hell is Sega Technologies? I started to look into Sega Technologies. Sega Technologies, they got a quote on their website from Bill Gates. I don't know anything about pandemics, Bill Gates. Quote, the next epidemic could originate on the computer screen of a terrorist intent on using genetic engineering to create a synthetic version of the smallpox virus. They make a product. It's called TPOXX, tecovirimat, and they make it for smallpox in case there's an outbreak. Let me read you the FDA drug label for TPOXX. The effectiveness of TPOXX for the treatment of smallpox disease has not been determined in humans because adequate and well-controlled field trials have not been feasible. Therefore, the effectiveness is based on non-human primates and rabbits. Survival rates observed in the animal studies may not be predictive of survival rates in clinical practice. And tecovirimat on Mpox, which is also another orthopox virus. The antiviral tecovirimat is safe but did not improve Clade 1 Mpox resolution in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They make a drug for smallpox, but obviously, unless there's a smallpox outbreak, you don't know if you're going to need it. If there is a smallpox outbreak, rather than just giving their drug willy-nilly, I might suggest that if there is, God forbid, some biological warfare, you might want to test it so you know if it actually works. That might be a lesson of the pandemic. But monkeypox does exist in the world, and they're going to use their drug off-label for monkeypox. But they don't have any good evidence that it actually works for monkeypox. But that doesn't seem to stop them from making money, does it? Why is that? This is why. The same reason why they hired Jay Varma. Why would you hire a former New York public health official if you do drug development for bioweapons? What does he know about drug development? As far as I can tell from his CV, nothing. The reason is that infectious disease public health and paying for these products has nothing to do with evidence. Biden gave $10 billion for Paxlovid with knowing, at least part of the time, knowing that Paxlovid did not improve outcomes in people who had already had COVID-19 and who had been vaccinated, which is most people. Biden is approving booster after booster, and we're spending all this money on boosters. We have no idea if you need a fall booster. They're not running those appropriate studies. Public health, I write, is a corrupt field. Instead of demanding evidence, they know that lobbying officials is the best way to sell a product. When it comes to infectious disease public health, corruption, nepotism, lobbying dictates spending and not evidence. And that's why they hired him. They're hiring him because they want him to lobby for more people to stock up on tecovirimat for Mpox, even though it doesn't work in Mpox in the only randomized study we have. And I think it's fair to say that we can't study it for smallpox until there is, in fact, some bioweapon, God forbid. But you can study it for Mpox in a randomized fashion. And you can say we're not going to prescribe it for Mpox until we have randomized study data that's positive, or we're only going to give it out in the context of a randomized trial. They're not doing that. They don't do evidence generation in this field. They do bioplausibility, pulling things out of their ass and then just implementing them broadly. That's their fundamental conceit. And who better than Jay Varma to go lobby those same people back there, the same elites who like the sex parties. Maybe they're at the sex parties too, you know. I don't know. So, overall thoughts. Public health failed us. I think they failed broadly. The CDC has 40,000 employees. I'm not aware of a single employee who publicly was able to say cloth masking 2-year-olds, a CDC policy, was stupid. I know some privately. I don't know anyone publicly. How many people need to be fired at the CDC? If you tell me you have 40,000 scientists, and somebody in this organization says, we're going to make these 2-year-olds wear cloth masks. We're going to make the President Biden enforce it in Head Start programs. They don't have to mask when they take a nap, obviously in the same room, the same airspace, but they'll wear the cloth mask at other time. And sure, they might chew it, but it probably does work. Even we can't study it, obviously. How many people should you fire when you see that level of scientific incompetence? I don't know. For me, it's not just the Varmas need to be fired. It's a lot more people need to be fired when you see that level of incompetence. I don't know why I set that alarm, but it's not to remind me to close this video. Okay, so that's a degree of incompetence, and I'm going to leave it in here because I don't like to edit my videos. I don't like videos when I watch on YouTube and they're all edited, because the person who's actually delivering the content, I'm not confident that person is able to speak coherently at length, and instead they have to edit so that they can create the illusion that they speak in complete sentences. I don't know. I don't like that kind of content, so I don't do it. I'm going to put all this in. Okay. Jay Varma, I mean, for the people who say despicable and worse, sure, you have my complete support. Hypocrite, yes, absolutely. Varma's the problem? No, he's a symptom of a disease, and the disease is public health rot. They're still so arrogant that they have continued to put COVID-19 vaccines in the childhood immunization schedule. What is the actual absolute risk to a child being born in 2024 of COVID-19 bad outcomes? They're not telling you that. That's one. They're not putting out a statistic out there. Two, it's much, much lower than it ever was. And is this vaccination justified? What evidence do they have? It's very poor evidence. I've talked about that so much. I'm not even sure it should have even been approved. That's one. Two, they're making people who've already had COVID a few months ago get a fall booster. What evidence supports that? They're so arrogant. They're not running any studies. They're saying not only a 70-year-old in a nursing home needs to get it, which I would like them to have evidence too, but okay, they're in a nursing home, they're demented, they're getting, okay, that's one thing. I would like there to be a randomized study there too, don't get me wrong, and you can do it very easily. They're saying a 40-year-old who already had COVID last month should get it. I think that needs a lot more evidence. They're saying a 20-year-old who is at risk of myocarditis should get it. Okay, that's a problem. They're saying a 12-year-old who already had COVID 4 times should get it. They're saying a 6-month-old should get the fall booster. How arrogant do you have to be to make these recommendations with no clinical data? You have to be completely delusional. The public health system is broken, the FDA is broken, the CDC is broken, all of these agencies are broken. The reason this company wants to hire people like Jay Varma is that evidence is not what sells these products. It's just pure lobbying and corruption and graft, and that's what they're running. And him having sex parties while he was enforcing restrictions on you and keeping your kids out of school, that's just a symbol of all the rot in this space, and I think that's the real lesson. Jay Varma's sex parties are a metaphor for public health. Do as I say, not as I do. Public health is a broken field. It appears now on Vinay Prasad's Observations and Thoughts. If you don't subscribe, you should subscribe. If you're a free subscriber, consider becoming a paid subscriber. That's how we keep this going. And I will end this video with one more plug for my discussion at Emory University. I'm going October 7th, 6:30 p.m., Emory University. Conversation with Carlos Del Rio. He's an ID expert, and me, moderated by Gerald Vong, who is a Doctor of Philosophy and Bioethics, and we're going to talk about masking mistakes, lessons from the science, policy, and coverage of COVID-19. I hope we talk about how masking kids was a terrible proposition. I hope we talk about a paper that we have forthcoming that unfortunately I think is going to come the day after this. Oh, that's a shame, but I might still talk about it. I hope we talk about vaccine mandates and what that did for Public Health Conference, and I hope we talk about the hypocrites, the Gavin Newsoms, the London Breeds who went dancing, the Nancy Pelosi's who got their hair done, the Deborah Bricks who had their own Thanksgiving, and the Jay Varmas and his wife who had the sex parties. I hope we talk about these hypocrites, because that proves to you that it wasn't just in retrospect, it was in real time that they were being hypocrites. And someday, I hope people recognize that the real pandemic heroes, in my estimation, were John Ioannidis, who was the first to say that perhaps this is the parable of the elephant being so scared of the mouse that it jumps off the cliff. Jay Bhattacharya, who was the first to articulate that we don't really know the IFR for sure, and he made an attempt to quantify the IFR, and people criticized that, and I do think there's some issues around the original confidence interval calculation in that paper, Santa Clara. But why the hell did Jay even have to do this study? Why didn't the CDC perform serial, multiple randomized samplings and calculate IFR across all the localities in America repeatedly over time? That's a CDC job. Meanwhile, the CDC was thinking about how to cloth mask 2-year-olds. They were totally out of their mind. Martin Kohlsdorf, who unfortunately was fired from Harvard University because he didn't get a COVID-19 vaccine, even though he had already had COVID and didn't need it. And what is it? And meanwhile, other people got exemptions. But strangely, when it comes exemption time for the guy who's been saying things you don't like, there ain't no exemptions left. That, to me, is a violation of academic freedom. Martin needs to be reinstated. Sinatra Gupta, I think, and the three of them who came up with Great Barrington. You can say, and I said at the time, I was critical of Great Barrington. I said that it didn't have enough content for me. I didn't sign it. But I always said that there are definitely elements of it that warrant debate, like should schools be reopened immediately? Should restrictions on young people be lifted? And I think they deserve so much credit now. And in retrospect, I see that what they did was really courageous to even question the orthodoxy. Meanwhile, the villains, I view them as Francis Collins, who sent the memo saying that we have to delegitimize these, quote, fringe epidemiologists, end quote, fringe epidemiologists, who's now I see writing articles in where was it, in The Atlantic or Time, where he says that we need to have a conversation with people who disagree with us. That's interesting, Francis, when during the pandemic, when you could have had some debates on COVID-19 policy, you did everything you could to halt those debates and emphasize the pro-lockdown, pro-masking solutions. You could have also run a randomized trial of masking since you did control the NIH research budget, but you didn't. And now suddenly you want to talk to people who disagree with you. Where was that open-mindedness when you actually were in power? Villain. Fauci, I think, clever politician, but also got things wrong repeatedly, and keeps himself protected despite the fact that, the emails keep tumbling out that they're trying to evade FOIA requests and the like, and the origins of the virus keep tumbling out, and I think that's extremely problematic for him. Deborah Bricks, of course, hypocrite. Thanksgiving for her, but not for you. Interesting. And then I think when the Biden-Harris administration took over, it just revved up through the roof. Trump capitulated to these fear-mongering public health types for a while, but Biden and Harris ran on the platform of capitulating to these types. And so when they came into office, it was 100 days to get schools open, except they didn't achieve that objective. And they excluded high schools from that objective, which was absolutely bonkers. Vaccination, but they vaccinated young people ahead of old people. They didn't give one dose to more old people and delay the second dose. They ignored the myocarditis safety signal. They ignored the VIT safety signal. They didn't space out doses. They pursued vaccination aggressively in younger populations. They bent over backwards to approve a vaccine that was failed non-inferiority study in very young kids. The original vaccine study from 6 months to 4 years was a non-inferiority study of Pfizer product where there was 2 doses, people may remember, and they had to achieve non-inferior geometric mean antibody titers, which itself is a very piss-poor low bar. They didn't achieve that, and the FDA allowed them a protocol amendment for a 3rd dose. That's why it was a 3-dose series. You can't do that. You don't get to protocol amend a non-inferiority study over and over again until you finally hit the mark. If you keep getting shots, if you keep getting to shoot the shot, they have the half-court shot. You get $1 million if you shoot a half-court shot. If you said, and there's somebody who insures that. What if the game was, you get $1 million if you have a half-court shot, you get as much time as you want, and you can keep shooting as many shots. Everyone's going to win eventually, okay? And that's what they're doing. It's not, and then nobody would insure the thing. They're definitely going to give out the $1 million. That's the problem with what they're doing. That was the fundamental problem with getting more shots on goal. Peter Marks and the FDA, terrible job. Okay, and then, of course, the Biden administration famously, this is all documented in congressional testimony from Krauss and in one of my prior videos, they pressured Krauss to give full authorization, full approval for the COVID-19 vaccine so they could mandate it. And when he didn't want to do that, he and Gruber were demoted internally and they later resigned. Trump didn't push any of the FDA reviewers out. The Biden administration did. So I think that this kind of public health juggernaut of hypocrisy is much deeper than Jay Varma, and I hope we talk about all these issues in Masking Mistakes. It'll also be available on Zoom, so I'll put the link in the comments. You can sign up for Zoom, and you can let them know that they should make the video available on YouTube, or give me the video and I'll put it on my YouTube channel. That's even more fun. All right. If you like this video, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, comment, leave a message below, and I will be back more. I've already recorded something a few weeks ago that was on when you should get a second opinion with cancer. I'm going to put that out, and I'm going to talk about some other things in the weeks to come. Until next time.